Hi there everyone and welcome to Paper Wishes Weekly Webisodes. I'm Sarah Newman and I'm excited to bring you the 32nd episode of Mixed Media the Paper Wishes Way. Today we're going to explore a very fun technique from our friend Fran at Stampendous. She calls this the Encrusted Jewel Technique, and it's a fabulous way to mix your media and create depth and texture. We'll be playing with two of her specially curated kits, the Encrusted Jewel Gold Collection and Silver. Now here you can really see the effect. I have a gorgeous mixture of fine glitter, glass glitter, large mica pieces, and embossing powder. Everything is heat set and bonded onto this piece of cardstock, but no embossing ink is needed. I'll show you exactly how easy it is to do, and I've got 4 projects to share with you today and lots of tips and tricks. For my projects today, I'm using the Chantilly Lace Collection, which has beautiful florals and lace, and the colors are perfect with both gold and silver. I'm using the 12 by 12 paper pack, cardstock pack, die cut set, and also the chipboard collection. As you can see, we have a lot to explore today. I'm so glad that you're here. Come play with us. Let's take a look at what's inside each kit, and then I'll show you the process for the Encrusted Jewel Technique. So here is the gold set. Now, when you get this, on the side, you'll have a strip of self-adhesive labels, which you can then use to label your individual jars, as I've done here. So each kit contains the same basic makeup. You have 5 jars, so you've got mica, you've got a glass glitter, and you have a glitter mix. Now you also have 2 embossing powders, one that's kind of a fine powder and a second one that's chunkier. It's got a more variegated powder in it. It's got a little bit more different colors and some different textures in it. So you have some matte elements and some shiny ones, and it's a really lovely collection. And I will point out at this point that you can use these for your Encrusted Jewels technique. You can also use any of these singly or a couple in combination with one another too. So everything that you have in the gold is similar to what you have in the silver. Okay, now mica and glitter won't melt with a heat tool on their own. So if you want to create a look like I showed you earlier, which is this piece here, you need to use the embossing powders as a bonding element. So that is what is helping the larger, chunkier elements to bond onto this background and make everything stay. So really easy process to do. I'm going to move aside the silver and I'll move aside this packaging. And I am working on my craft mat. This is really important. I'm going to bring in a piece of the dark, kind of a chocolate brown cardstock from that Chantilly Lace cardstock collection. Now, if you're hoping to have some instructions to go along, this is also included in each of the kits. So Fran will give you a step-by-step on this. And this is a good thing to have just kind of on hand as you're doing this. Now, the other thing that's important to have is a little scooper or spoon of some sort. I recommend that you use metal rather than using plastic, because plastic can introduce some static into your embossing powders, and metal just kind of helps to keep things less staticky. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to set aside these 3 elements, and I'm going to start with my embossing powders. So I'm going to start with this beautiful fine gold. This is the Pearl Champagne, and I use this quite a lot. I'm just going to dip in my palette knife, and then I'm going to kind of sprinkle this on here. Now I'm not using any embossing ink. I don't need this. I'll show you why in a second. So I'm going to add this on here. The palette knife makes it a lot easier to apply things in the right area. Okay, now I'm going to want to add in some of my chunkier elements. So let's get some of these fragments. And this is the mica. This is really nice. Kind of chunky pieces of mica. And again, I'm just going to dip in the tip of my palette knife and kind of sprinkle those on. Now with the mica, I want to make sure that I don't have like really huge clumps stuck together. So I can use my palette knife to sort of separate some of those pieces and spread things out so that I can place things where I want them to be, mostly in the area where I've got my embossing powder on there. I'm going to be heating from underneath, so it's kind of like reverse layering. Okay, let's add in, this is some of the champagne glass glitter. Another element that needs to have some embossing powder for it to melt. Oh, take a look at this. Really pretty. And again, just kind of spattering that on there. And let's see, let's add in some of the glitter mix, Gold Halo. Okay, and there's not really a rhyme or reason to how much I'm adding, just kind of as much as you want, as much or as little as you want. All right, so now what I want to do is add in a little bit more embossing powder, just to make sure that I've got some bonding elements that are touching all of the elements that won't melt by themselves. So in this case, I'm using the aged gold embossing powder, and this is the one that's a little bit thicker and chunkier, and it's got some black in it, it's got some gold, it's really beautiful. So I'm just going to come along and add some of this in here too. Kind of tap this along, and I really like this effect so far. Okay, so I'm going to make sure that all of the lids are on before I use my heat tool. And if I need to do any kind of shifting around, if I have some smaller pieces, I can also use my craft knife to kind of shuffle things around if I want to. Okay, now here comes the trick. When you're heat embossing, normally you will take your embossing tool and blow straight onto your embossing powder. Do not do this in this case because, of course, there's nothing sticking all of these elements down, so they'll just blow straight all over your craft room. And it only takes once to remember this forever. Instead, what you need to do is heat set from underneath. So you need to lift this up somehow. I really do recommend, if you have some tweezers, that's a good idea. Have something that you can hold onto so that it's not going to burn your hands. Okay, so hang in there with me for a second. I'm going to do some heat setting and we'll take a look. Okay, now I don't think I'm quite done. I've got quite a lot of elements on here, but I know it was a little tricky with the camera angle to see this, but I think if I'm moving this down within range, you can see where this has melted along here. So now what I'm going to do, because I've got a larger space, I'm going to come along here and clip the other side, and again, heat set from underneath. Okay, and now I think we can take a look. I may have some elements that are going to kind of tap off, which is fine. I have a few of those, some of the bigger items on there, but for the most part, my glitter is on there, my mica is on there, and I've got a beautiful and shiny encrusted jewel technique. And just look at this in combination with that dark chocolate cardstock. Really beautiful. So I always give an extra little tap, and then you kind of put all of your excess bits to one side. Now what you can do if you're doing quite a lot of these is have an extra little jar, and then you can save some of this mixture as well. And then you've got your own kind of custom mix in here too. So beautiful, quick, easy to do. Again, the only thing to remember is that you're heating from underneath. Now, one thing I would recommend that you do, have some kind of clipper or holder so that you can hold that cardstock a little more easily. When you're heating from underneath, you do want to make sure to keep moving that embossing tool. Don't hold it in one place. Watch the embossing from the top. The reason you don't want to hold it in one place is that you can end up overheating from the bottom of your cardstock. So just exercise a little bit of care. Always be working onto your craft mat as well. Okay, now that we've seen the process, let's look at some projects. For this card, I used the Silver Encrusted Jewels collection for the background. And yes, I used all 5 of the elements in the pack. So this is giving me the beautiful mica that really stands out, as well as some of that chunky embossing, the glitter. Everything is just coming together to create a really beautiful background that you can see here. And this is on the burgundy cardstock from that Chantilly lace collection. And I just love the contrast on here. Now you can mix your silver and gold sets, of course. You can use any of the elements separately as we've discussed too. So here I've used the aged gold embossing powder, so from the gold collection, to edge around this burgundy cardstock. And the card focal that you see here is a medallion shape from the chipboard collection. It's this one right here. And for this, I've just simply used the Pearl Champagne embossing powder just directly on top in a more traditional way with an embossing ink pad. So let me demonstrate that for you quickly so we can see how you can use some of these elements separately too. I'm going to bring in a piece of scrap cardstock, and I've got my beautiful, delicate chipboard medallion here. Now, the pearl embossing powder for this, because this is a really fine embossing powder, it's going to allow me to heat emboss on here without sort of clogging any of these really delicate elements in here. So what I'll do is grab my trusty Wow embossing ink pad, and I'm just going to take this, kind of flip it over, and decide which of the sides I want to be the front, and I just kind of press that on here. Okay, kind of walk it around, make sure that I've got ink on all of the tips of this, and then holding it by the edges, I'm going to put this just right inside my folded piece of scrap paper, and that's just so I can more easily funnel back my embossing powder when I'm done, shaking off the excess. So I'm just using a very generous approach here because I want to make sure to get all of those areas covered. Okay, and then kind of tap this off again using some tweezers, and I'm going to take this gently and close it. I'll funnel that back in after a second. I'll put this well away from the heat tool and then heat set this, and let's take a look. Okay, and here we go. I'm going to handle this a bit carefully because it is hot, but take a look. How beautiful is this? And you can add this onto your project right away as soon as it cools down. I like to use the sticky specs for this, and it just makes it easier to pop down and adhere it without any kind of messy glue. So here I've got my medallion onto a scalloped circle die cutting layer here. So I've got the medallion, I've got a circle, and then I've got a scalloped circle here. I've got some really pretty flourishes. These are from the Flower Frenzy die cutting collection. And then on the card inside, I've got another one of the scalloped circle die cuts, and I've got some more flourishes, and this flourish here has also been gold embossed, and this is another one from this same collection. So that's one right here, and that is just embossing beautifully and gives a really nice effect to the inside of our card. Okay, here's another project for you, again using the same technique. So you can also use this for home decor purposes too. So in this case, I am using a combination of 2 chipboard pieces. I have an 8-inch chipboard scallop piece, which is this piece back here, with a 7-inch circle on top. Now I've embossed the scallop, you can see here just the edges, with the aged gold embossing powder. So this is this one that's a bit chunkier. It's got some black in it. It's got some of that softer gold, but it's got a more variegated effect than the pearl. And this means that I'm able to get a really beautiful and very different look. Now again, I just embossed around the edges because that's the only part that's going to show, but you can see the variation of texture that's in that mix. I love that. Then I did the encrusted jewel technique with gold on this piece of Chantilly lace paper. Now, I did this before I covered the chipboard circle with the pattern paper, and this is important because the chipboard is pretty thick and it will be too thick for the heat embossing to work easily from underneath, and you may find it scorching, so we'll try and avoid that. So do your embossing and then glue your paper onto the chipboard circle and just use some scissors to trim around the outside edge. I've also added a Chantilly lace chipboard border on here, and I've got this thankful message on here, and I've got some flowers and flourishes from the Flower Frenzy die set. Now if you look closely on here, you'll see that some of the layers are also encrusted. So when you're doing your encrusted jewels technique, you can also die cut from these pieces too. Now I do recommend that you use the finer glitter when you're doing your die cutting. If you're doing die cutting with a maybe more detailed or smaller shape. Otherwise, the mica and the glass glitter are pretty tough stuff, and they tend to scatter on your die cutting machine when you're running it through there. So I recommend that you stick with the finer embossing powders and the finer glitter. Okay, so this is a really easy way to do it. Now I've got another card project here, this happy birthday card, and this one is also using some of the flowers that have the encrusted jewel technique on here. And I've used the gold and the silver. I've also used the gold to go around the outside edge, and I've used the gold again on the back of this scalloped circle element here, just to give a really nice overall metallic effect. Now to go around the outside edge of this circle, I've used some of the Midas Gold pigment ink, and that's going to tie everything together here. Now for the card inside, I've got some more of these elements and a message on here, a little bit of gold ribbon to tie everything together. Now we have been talking about using the encrusted jewel technique all together, using all of the elements in the kit, but of course you can also use the mica and the glitter alone if you are using a white glue. So I have one more project to share with you, and we'll take a look at that technique. So here we have a really fun tag die cut. Now this one I've die cut using the tag in a bag, and I've die cut it from some of that beautiful patterned paper. Then I've created this border down here at the bottom using only the silver mica and glass glitter. Now for this, I haven't used the embossing powders or ink at all, just a little bit of white glue from Creative Expressions. You just need to dab that onto your cardstock or pattern paper and then sprinkle on some mica and then some glitter. So let me show you how easy this is to do. Okay, I've got a piece of my beautiful cardstock here, and I've got my silver glitter, and I've also got my mica. Okay, I'm going to start with my mica. This is the chunkier of the two elements, and then I'll just go ahead and open up my glass glitter too. So all I need to do is apply the glue, not too thick, but not too thin either, just right onto my cardstock. And I'm going to use my finger for this. So I'll just dab this on here. I need enough so that my elements will adhere. Okay, I'm going to be using my palette knife again, same process as before. Just kind of tap this right into that wet glue. This is going to be beautiful, beautiful combination. So this is going to give you a different effect than the encrusted jewels, but I think it's also a really nice way to use some of the elements in these kits in a different way too. So you can see how versatile they are. Okay, so that's the mica, and then I'll come back in with this glass glitter, which is just beautiful. And I'm using this to kind of fill in some of the empty areas where the mica doesn't cover, so that I get some really nice variation in here. Okay, now all I need to do is let this dry, but before I do that, I'm going to take a piece of scrap paper cardstock and just press that down and make sure that everything has adhered. And then all I need to do is just let this air dry and I'm ready to go. So again, gives you another nice alternative for how you're using your encrusted jewel kits. Okay, another quick look at our tag. And you can see here the chipboard elements are coordinating with this beautiful border. And the chipboard elements are just simply inked using some metallic pigment ink, so some silver ink. This goes beautifully with the collection. I've also been using the gold to go with some of the gold projects that I've got as well. Now, I think we have seen just how many different fantastic ways we can use the encrusted jewel set. Everything from Fran's fantastic and very innovative technique to maybe some more traditional ways. Of course, you can use the different elements to do your solid backgrounds, to do die cutting, to go around the edges, and of course, you can use the elements individually as well. So I really hope that you have enjoyed this session with the fabulous Encrusted Jewels collection. Thank you so much for joining me today, and a really big thank you for being a part of the Paper Wishes family. We're glad that you're here with us. I can't wait to see what you create, so do be sure to leave a comment. We love to hear what you think. Each item can be purchased separately, and you can see them below. However, we've also bundled them into a creative money saver just for you. For the money saver, just see this webisode on paperwishes.com.